Vincent Harper sat in the conference room of Sterling and Associates, his leather briefcase resting against the chair leg. The clock on the wall showed 9:23 a.m. Claire was late. 23 minutes late, to be exact. He had arrived 15 minutes early, as he always did for important meetings. Punctuality was one of the principles that had helped him build NexTech Solutions from a garage startup into a billion-dollar enterprise. The divorce should have been simple. They'd already agreed on everything through their lawyers. The division of assets, the sale of their Malibu beach house, even the custody arrangement for their golden retriever, Benson. Everything was settled, except for the signatures. Thomas Sterling. His attorney poured himself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher on the mahogany table. Vincent noticed how the older man's hand trembled slightly. Thomas had handled the prenuptial agreement 7 years ago, when Vincent and Claire got married. Back then, the atmosphere had been celebratory. Today, the silence felt heavy. The waiting game Vincent checked his phone for the 4th time. No messages. No missed calls. This wasn't like Claire. Even during their worst arguments, she had never been inconsiderate. She valued other people's time, sometimes more than her own. It was one of the qualities he had loved about her when they first met at a charity gala in Seattle. She had been volunteering at the event, coordinating the silent auction. He had been one of the donors, writing checks because his publicist said it was good for his image. But when Claire approached him to thank him for his contribution, something shifted. She looked him in the eyes and asked him why he really came. Not to network or be seen, but really why. He had been honest in a way he rarely was with strangers. He told her he came because his mother had died of the same disease the charity supported, and writing checks helped him feel less helpless about it. They talked for 3 hours that night. He forgot about the other donors and the networking opportunities. She forgot about her coordination duties. By the end of the evening, he knew he wanted to see her again. The storm breaks, the conference room door flew open with a bang. Vincent and Thomas both jumped. But it wasn't Claire standing in the doorway. It was Rachel Kim, Claire's best friend since college. Rachel's face was blotchy from crying. Her hands shook as she gripped her car keys. Vincent stood up immediately. Something was very wrong. Rachel's voice came out in gasps. "You need to come with me right now. Claire's at Mercy General Hospital. There was an accident." The words didn't make sense at first. Vincent's brain tried to process them, but they felt like puzzle pieces from different boxes. "What kind of accident? Is she okay?" "No, Vincent. She's not okay." Rachel's voice cracked. A delivery truck ran a stop sign near the intersection of 5th and Madison. It hit the driver's side of her car. The impact was severe. Thomas was already gathering papers, murmuring something about rescheduling. Vincent felt his legs go weak. He grabbed the edge of the table for support. The rush to the hospital, Rachel drove because Vincent's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She ran 2 red lights getting to Mercy General. Neither of them cared. She told him what she knew. Claire had been on her way to the law office when it happened, just 3 blocks away. A witness called 911 immediately. The paramedics had to use special equipment to cut her out of the crushed vehicle. She was unconscious when they pulled her free. Vincent stared out the window at the passing buildings. His reflection looked like a stranger. When had he become this person? The kind of man who sat in a conference room, irritated that his wife was late to their own divorce proceedings while she lay broken on a stretcher? Memories in motion, his mind drifted back 3 years. That was when things started to change. NexTech had just secured its Series C funding. $50 million? Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of his time. Investors, board members, potential partners, media outlets. His calendar became a nightmare of back-to-back meetings. Claire had understood at first. She supported his dreams. She always had. But understanding turned into lonely dinners. Support became silent resentment. He remembered coming home at midnight to find her asleep on the couch, a cold plate of food on the coffee table. He remembered the vacation to Tuscany they planned, but never took because he couldn't leave during the product launch. He remembered her birthday last year when he sent his assistant to buy her a necklace because he was stuck in Tokyo. When had he stopped seeing her? Really seeing her? She had tried to talk to him about it 6 months ago. They were having breakfast. One of the rare mornings they were both home at the same time. She had reached across the table and taken his hand. "Vincent, I miss you," she had said simply. He had pulled his hand away to answer an email on his phone. "I'm right here, Claire." "No, you're not." "You haven't been here in a long time." He had dismissed her concerns. Told her she was being dramatic. That building a company required sacrifices. That she knew what she signed up for when she married an entrepreneur. The hurt in her eyes had been clear, but he had chosen not to acknowledge it. It was easier to pretend everything was fine. The hospital door's Mercy General loomed before them. Rachel parked haphazardly in the emergency zone. They ran through the automatic doors together. The smell of disinfectant hit Vincent immediately. A nurse at the front desk looked up as they approached. "Claire Harper," Rachel said breathlessly. She was brought in from a car accident. A nurse typed on her computer. Her expression remained neutral, professional. "She's in the ICU on the 4th floor. Only immediate family is allowed." "I'm her husband," Vincent said. The words felt strange. He was about to become her ex-husband, but right now, in this moment, he was still her husband. Maybe that still meant something. Maybe it had to mean something, as they hurried to the elevator. Vincent realized the divorce papers were still sitting unsigned on the conference room table. And for the first time in months, he hoped they would stay that way. The 4th floor was quieter than the emergency room, but the silence felt more ominous. Vincent and Rachel followed the signs to the intensive care unit. A doctor met them outside the secure doors. Her badge read Dr. Patricia Monroe. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from making life and death decisions every day. "Mr. Harper?" she asked, her voice gentle but direct. Vincent nodded, unable to find his voice. Her wife sustained significant injuries in the collision. "She has a severe concussion, fractured ribs, collapsed lung that we've stabilized, and internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. We managed to stop the bleeding, but the next 72 hours are critical. She's sedated right now to give her body time to heal." Each word hit Vincent like a physical blow. Rachel squeezed his arm, steadying him. "Can I see her?" he managed to ask. Dr. Monroe nodded. "Follow me. But I need to prepare you. She's connected to several machines. It might be difficult to see her like this." Nothing could have prepared him. Claire lay motionless in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and hummed. Her face was pale, almost gray, with dark bruises blooming across her cheek and forehead. Her left arm was in a cast, suspended slightly above the bed. A ventilator helped her breathe, and monitors tracked every heartbeat, every breath, every moment of her fragile existence. Vincent's knees buckled. Rachel caught him, guiding him to the chair beside the bed. He reached out with a trembling hand and touched Claire's fingers where they lay still against the white sheets. Her skin felt cool, almost lifeless. "Claire," he whispered, "I'm here. I'm so sorry. Please come back." The first night, Rachel stayed with him for the first few hours, but eventually she had to leave to call Claire's family. Claire's parents lived in Portland. Her younger brother was stationed overseas with the Navy. Someone had to break the news gently. Alone with Claire, Vincent began to talk. He told her about the morning, about waiting in the conference room, about how angry he had been that she was late. The shame of it burned through him. He told her about the drive to the hospital, about how Rachel had run red lights. He told her things he should have said months ago, years ago, that he loved her, that he had always loved her, that he had just forgotten how to show it. A nurse came in periodically to check Claire's vitals and adjust her medications. Each time, Vincent asked if there was any change. Each time, the nurse gave him a sympathetic smile and shook her head. Around midnight, Vincent's phone buzzed. It was his business partner, Derek, asking where he was. They had a presentation to investors in the morning. Vincent turned off his phone without responding. For the first time in 3 years, NexTech would have to wait. The journal the next morning, Claire's mother arrived. Margaret Harper was a small woman with silver hair and Claire's same green eyes. She had flown in overnight from Portland. When she entered the ICU room and saw her daughter, she broke down completely. Vincent stood and offered her his chair, but Margaret shook her head. "Stay with her," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Then she looked at Vincent with an expression he couldn't quite read. Anger mixed with something else. Pity, perhaps. After composing herself, Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a leather-bound journal. "Claire gave this to me 3 weeks ago. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should make sure you read it." Vincent took the journal with shaking hands. The leather was soft, worn from use. He recognized it immediately. He had given it to Claire on their 2nd anniversary. She had always loved to write, to process her thoughts and feelings on paper. "She still loved you, Vincent," Margaret said quietly. "Even after everything. Even when she asked for the divorce, she never stopped loving you." After Margaret left to get coffee, Vincent opened the journal. The first entry was dated 4 years ago, back when things were still good between them. Claire wrote about a weekend they had spent hiking in the mountains. How Vincent had surprised her with a picnic at the summit. She wrote about feeling happier than she had ever been. But as Vincent flipped through the pages, the tone changed. The entries became shorter, sadder. She wrote about the loneliness of eating dinner alone night after night. She wrote about lying awake at 3 in the morning, wondering if Vincent would remember to come home. She wrote about the moment she realized she had become invisible to him. One entry, dated 8 months ago, made Vincent's heart stop. "I saw a doctor today. Dr. Chen confirmed what I suspected. I have endometriosis. Stage 3. He says it might affect my ability to have children." I wanted to tell Vincent tonight, but he came home at 11 and went straight to his office to take a call. I sat on the couch with the medical reports in my lap, waiting. He never came out. I went to bed alone and cried into my pillow. I don't think he even noticed I had been crying. How do you tell someone you're breaking when they don't see you anymore? Vincent closed the journal, unable to read more. The weight of his failures crushed down on him. Claire had been dealing with a medical diagnosis alone. She had needed him, and he hadn't been there. He hadn't even noticed. The revelation Rachel returned that afternoon with fresh clothes for Vincent and food he couldn't eat. She found him still reading the journal, tears streaming down his face. "You didn't know about the diagnosis, did you?" Rachel asked softly, sitting in the other chair. Vincent shook his head. "She never told me. But I never gave her the chance to tell me, did I? I was always too busy, always too focused on the next deal, the next milestone." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Claire made me promise not to tell you. She said you had worked too hard to build NexTech. She didn't want to be the reason you lost focus. She thought if she just stayed out of your way, you could achieve everything you wanted." "But I wanted her," Vincent said, his voice breaking. "I wanted a life with her. I just forgot that somewhere along the way." Rachel reached over and squeezed his hand. "Then you need to tell her that. When she wakes up, if she wakes up." The "if" hung in the air between them like a storm cloud. The crisis on the second night. At 2:47 a.m., the machines around Claire's bed began to alarm. Vincent jerked awake from the uncomfortable chair where he had been dozing. Within seconds, Dr. Monroe rushed in with 2 nurses. "Her blood pressure is dropping," one nurse called out. "Possible internal bleeding," Dr. Monroe said, her hands moving quickly to examine Claire. "Get an ultrasound in here now. Mr. Harper, you need to step outside," Vincent said firmly. "I'm not leaving her, Mr. Harper. We need space to work." "Then work around me." "I'm not leaving." Dr. Monroe looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine, but stay against the wall and don't interfere." The next 20 minutes were the longest of Vincent's life. The medical team worked with urgent precision, running tests, adjusting medications, consulting in rapid medical terminology he couldn't understand. Claire's face remained peaceful, unaware of the crisis happening around her. Finally, Dr. Monroe stepped back. "The bleeding hasn't resumed. It was a pressure fluctuation from the medication. We've stabilized her, but this is a warning. Her body is very fragile right now. The next 24 hours are even more critical than we thought." After the medical team left, Vincent returned to Claire's side. He took her hand again, holding it like a lifeline. "You have to fight, Claire. Please fight. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I failed you in every way that matters. But I'm here now. I'm finally here, and I'm not going anywhere." Do you hear me? I'm not leaving you ever again." The machines beeped their steady rhythm. Claire's chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance. But somewhere deep inside, Vincent believed she could hear him. He had to believe it, because the alternative was unthinkable. Outside the window, dawn began to break over the city. Vincent had spent 48 hours at Claire's bedside, and he would spend 48 more if he had to. He would spend forever if that's what it took. The divorce papers were still unsigned, sitting in a law office across town, and Vincent prayed they would remain that way. Because despite everything, despite all his mistakes and failures, he still had a chance to make things right. He just needed Claire to wake up. Vincent hadn't left the hospital in 3 days. His suit jacket hung over the back of the chair, wrinkled beyond recognition. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his tie long since discarded. He had a rough stubble covering his jaw, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. But he didn't care about any of it. His entire world had shrunk to this small room, this bed. This woman who still hadn't opened her eyes. Margaret brought him coffee that morning. The good kind from the cafe down the street, not the hospital vending machine sludge he had been surviving on. She sat with him in silence for a while, both of them watching Claire's chest rise and fall with the help of the ventilator. "You know," Margaret said eventually, "when Claire first told me she was going to marry you, I was worried. You were so driven, so focused on your career. I thought she would get lost in your ambition." Vincent felt the words like arrows, but he deserved every one. "But then I saw the way you looked at her on your wedding day," Margaret continued, "like she was the only person in the entire world. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe love would be enough." "Should have been," Vincent said hoarsely. "She should have been enough. More than enough." Margaret patted his hand. "The question isn't what should have been, Vincent. The question is, what happens now? If she wakes up..." "When she wakes up," Vincent corrected firmly. The first sign had happened at 11:34 a.m. on the third day. Vincent was reading to Claire from a book of poetry they used to share, the pages worn from years of use. He was halfway through a Pablo Neruda poem when he felt it. The slightest pressure against his hand. So faint, he thought he imagined it. He stopped reading mid-sentence, his heart pounding. Claire. Nothing. The machines continued their steady beeping. The ventilator continued its rhythmic breathing. But Vincent was certain he had felt something. He squeezed her hand gently. "Claire, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand, please." Seconds passed like hours. Then, so softly he almost missed it, her fingers twitched against his palm. Vincent jumped to his feet, his chair clattering backward. Nurse, doctor, someone. Dr. Monroe arrived within minutes, bringing 2 nurses with her. They ran through a series of tests, checking Claire's pupils with a light, monitoring her brain activity, assessing her responses. Vincent stood pressed against the wall, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. "She's starting to come out of the sedation," Dr. Monroe said, unable to hide the relief in her voice. "This is a very good sign. But Mr. Harper, you need to understand that waking up is just the first step. We don't yet know the extent of neurological damage from the concussion. She may be confused, disoriented. She may not remember the accident or even events before it." "I don't care," Vincent said. "As long as she's alive, as long as she comes back." Awakening it took another 6 hours. Vincent watched as Claire slowly, painfully, fought her way back to consciousness. Her eyelids fluttered. Her fingers moved more deliberately. Small sounds escaped her throat around the ventilator. Dr. Monroe made the decision to remove the ventilator at 5:47 p.m. "She's breathing well enough on her own," she explained. "But this might be uncomfortable for her." The procedure took less than a minute, but Vincent felt every second of Claire's discomfort. She coughed, her face contorting in pain from her broken ribs. The nurses adjusted her oxygen to a simple nasal cannula and propped her up slightly to help her breathe easier. Then, slowly, Claire's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, confused. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights. Her gaze wandered around the room, trying to make sense of where she was, until finally, her eyes landed on Vincent. For a moment, neither of them moved. They simply looked at each other across the small space that felt like an ocean. Vincent? Her voice was barely a whisper, raw from the ventilator tube. He was at her side instantly, taking her hand. I'm here. You're at Mercy General Hospital. You were in an accident, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks. The divorce, she whispered. I was supposed to meet you. I was late. None of that matters, Vincent said, his own tears falling freely now. Nothing matters except that you're here, that you're alive. Claire tried to shake her head, but winced at the pain. You don't understand. I was coming to tell you something. Before we signed the papers, I needed you to know. Dr. Monroe stepped forward gently. Mrs. Harper, you need to rest. You've been through severe trauma, but Claire's eyes never left Vincent's face. I'm pregnant, she whispered. The world stopped. Vincent felt like he had been struck by lightning. What? 8 weeks, Claire said, fresh tears streaming down her face. I found out 2 weeks ago. I didn't know how to tell you. We were getting divorced. You had moved on. But I couldn't sign those papers without telling you the truth.
Ow.
Vincent sank into the chair, his legs unable to hold him. The baby? Is the baby okay? Dr. Monroe checked the chart, her expression carefully neutral. We ran comprehensive tests when Mrs. Harper was admitted. The fetus shows a strong heartbeat. Against all odds, the pregnancy appears viable. But Mrs. Harper will need to be monitored very closely. The trauma her body experienced puts her at high risk. Vincent looked at Claire, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. She looked terrified, vulnerable, and so heartbreakingly beautiful despite the bruises and bandages. I know you didn't want this, Claire said quietly. I know we talked about waiting, about focusing on your career first. I know this changes everything. You're right, Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. It changes everything. But Claire, you have to understand something. I've spent the last 3 days sitting in this chair, reading your journal, learning about everything I missed, everything I was too blind to see. You were diagnosed with endometriosis 8 months ago, and I didn't even notice you were struggling. You thought you might never be able to have children, and you dealt with that fear alone. Claire's eyes widened. You read my journal? Your mother gave it to me, and every page was like a knife to my heart. I realized I had become exactly what I swore I would never be. My father was never home. He chose his work over his family every single day. I watched what it did to my mother, to me, to my sister, and I promised myself I would be different. But I wasn't different at all. I was exactly the same. The confession, Claire was crying harder now, her body shaking with sobs that made her wince in pain. Vincent stood and carefully, so carefully, leaned over the bed rail to get closer to her. I thought I was doing the right thing, Claire said through her tears. Letting you go. You were building something incredible. NexTech is going to change the world. I didn't want to be the anchor holding you back. Don't you understand? Vincent said, his voice breaking. You were never an anchor. You were the reason I wanted to build anything at all. When we first met, I told you about my mother, about losing her. Do you remember what you said to me? Claire nodded slowly. I said that the best way to honor her was to live a life she would be proud of. Exactly. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what that meant. I thought it meant making money, building companies, proving I was successful. But my mother wouldn't have been proud of any of that if it meant losing you. She would have been heartbroken to see what I became. Dr. Monroe quietly ushered the nurses out of the room, giving them privacy. Vincent continued, his words pouring out like a dam had broken. When Rachel told me about the accident, when I saw you lying here, I realized that I could lose you. Really lose you. Not in a divorce, not in a separation, but forever. And the thought of a world without you in it was unbearable. I don't want the divorce, Claire. I don't want any of it. I want you. I want our baby. I want a chance to be the man I should have been all along. Vincent, you can't just decide that because of the accident, because of the baby, Claire said, her voice weak but firm. These last 2 years, we barely knew each other anymore. We were living in the same house, but in completely different worlds. Then let me back into your world, Vincent pleaded. Let me prove to you that I can change. I've already started. I turned my phone off 3 days ago. Derek has called the hospital 17 times. There was an investor meeting I missed, a product launch I wasn't at, a dozen fires that probably need putting out. And I don't care about any of it. The company can survive without me for a few days. But I can't survive without you. The decision. Claire closed her eyes, exhausted from the conversation and the medication and the trauma her body had endured. When she opened them again, they were clearer, more focused. Do you know what I was thinking about right before the accident? She asked softly. Vincent shook his head. I was thinking about our second date. We went to that tiny Italian restaurant in Pike Place Market. You ordered in terrible Italian, and the waiter laughed at you, and you didn't care. We talked for 4 hours. You told me about wanting to create technology that would help people, really help them. Not just make money, but make a difference. Your eyes lit up when you talked about it. That's the man I fell in love with. The man who dreamed about changing the world, but never forgot why it mattered. I'm still that man, Vincent said desperately. I just lost my way. Maybe we both lost our way, Claire admitted. I stopped fighting for us. I stopped telling you when I was hurting. I just retreated into myself and let the distance grow. That's on me too. Vincent wanted to argue, to take all the blame himself, but he knew she was right. Marriage was a partnership. They'd both failed each other in different ways. Claire took a shaky breath. I'm scared, Vincent. I'm scared to trust this. I'm scared to believe that things can be different. I'm scared that 3 months from now you'll be back to working 18-hour days. I'll be alone again, except this time with a baby. Then I'll prove it to you, Vincent said firmly. Every single day. I'll prove that I've changed. I've already called an executive headhunter. I'm hiring a CEO for NexTech. Someone who can run the day-to-day operations while I focus on strategy and innovation. The parts I actually enjoy. The parts that don't require me to sacrifice everything else. Claire's eyes widened. You would do that? I already did. I made the call yesterday while you were sleeping. The company will be fine. Better than fine? It's time I remembered that I started NexTech to improve lives, not to consume mine. The Hope nurse knocked softly and entered. I'm sorry, but Mrs. Harper really needs to rest now. Her body has been through significant trauma. Vincent nodded, but he didn't let go of Claire's hand. I'll be right outside. I'm not going anywhere, Vincent Claire said as he started to pull away. The divorce papers. He looked back at her, his heart in his throat. I don't want to sign them either, she said quietly. But I need time. I need to see if this is real, if you really have changed. Can you give me that? Time to heal? Time to trust again? I'll give you all the time you need, Vincent promised. As long as you give me the chance to prove myself. Claire managed a small smile, the first one he had seen in months. Okay, we'll try. It wasn't a grand declaration of love. It wasn't a passionate reunion. It was tentative, uncertain, fragile. But it was a beginning. And as Vincent stepped out into the hallway, leaving Claire to rest under the watchful care of the medical team, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope the divorce papers would remain unsigned. The company would learn to function without him being available every minute of every day. And he would spend every moment proving to Claire that she and their baby were his priority. Not his only priority, but his first priority. Always. Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Vincent watched it for a moment, thinking about new beginnings and second chances. Then he pulled out his phone, turned it back on, and sent a message to Derek. Taking family leave effective immediately. Promote Jessica to interim CEO. I'll be available for emergencies only. Trust the team. They've got this. Then he turned the phone off again and settled into the uncomfortable chair in the hallway outside Claire's room. He would be there when she woke up. He would be there for every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every moment of her recovery. He would be there. Finally, completely, undeniably there. And that was where his second chance began. The end.